Yeah, thank you. I think great session, and thank you for inviting us all to be part of this important conversation. I'm going to tell a little bit of a personal story. I think it starts to illustrate some of the points that have been made in the morning. This is my high school fine arts teacher, Barbara Ogario. People who've taken fine arts classes recognize the smile on the face and some of the tools in her pocket. I am also a product of the California public school system, circa 60s, 70s, and I am an Otis alumni.
I need your skin cream.
And I am an Otis alumni. That's because I live in the fog.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's
Always
my skin cream.
moisturized. Yeah.
Right.
That's
So one of the things that Mrs. Ogario did was she took her classes every year to the local art schools. It wasn't something that was part of the curricula, but she thought it was important that we see that there was actually a career choice that was maybe contrary to what a lot of us were thinking about. So this was sort of my career choice. Both my folks worked at Stanford, but there was this other crazy place called Otis down in Los Angeles that seemed a lot more appealing to me. This was also the career path. So if you look at that sort of fork in the road, my mother worked at the Stanford Law School. There were a lot of really interesting people there. I grew up in a very argumentative family, so it seemed like a natural course. But again, I loved to draw, I loved to make, and I discovered sort of in May when I had to finally choose where I was going to go that you can get paid in the field of art.
A real Jewish dilemma, too.
Yeah.
For my community.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So, that's a fork in the road. So, this maybe shows you when I was at Otis, and that those are not future attorneys. That's what art students looked like in the early 80s. So I did decide to pursue design. At the time that I was at Otis, we had a fantastic chairman of the communication design program. Her name was Sheila de Bretteville. And Sheila is an amazing human being who's done some terrific work and was a fantastic leader. I sort of had a choice in LA of two design schools. I won't mention the other one. What was appealing about Otis was that it really put an emphasis on thinking. And Sheila put an emphasis on our asking why and how do you use design as a form of query. How do you use it to ask why things are the way that they are, and how do you ask it to ask, why aren't things different, and how might we make them different? My particular focus is on how to use design to communicate complex information. I was tricked into this because the federal government was going to fund such work, and then in the Reagan administration that went away while I was in school. So, but I became fascinated by it. That led me to working for a fellow named Richard Saul Wurman, who's best known probably as the founder of TED and also of the Access guidebooks. And I learned a lot about how to communicate very complex information in very straightforward ways in the publishing world. So, this is sort of a predictable path, and you saw it in the creative economy description that this is one of those roles that we might expect. I also was fortunate enough then to go work in the area of user interface and user experience design with one of the pioneers in graphical user interface, a fellow named Aaron Marcus, who had been with Sheila at Yale, and there were some interesting connections there. And here was where I started to learn about the fact that design was something that was done in collaboration with folks who didn't have degrees in design. That in fact cognitive psychologists and human factors experts and engineers were an important part of how we might solve and how we might think and how we might be creative. Mm-hmm. So it was an eye-opening experience. Somehow, that did not lead me to being wealthy. It somehow led me to working for a financial services company, Wells Fargo Nico Investment Advisors, which was then acquired by Barclays Global Investors. And I had the good fortune then to apply my design training to the creation of not only effective communications that would help lay people understand how they might invest in the stock market and how they might manage their 401k plans and things like that, but I got to help invent new financial products that were accessible and usable for lay people. That took me to London, which was trailing the U.S. by a good 20 years in terms of lay people participating in those markets, and I ended up somehow running the brand for Barclays over 200 businesses in 70 countries. So again, not the necessarily the predictable path for an art school grad from the mid-'80s, but I happened to enter the field at a point in time where there was this flux and where that kind of mobility and moving into other fields and other areas of interest was quite possible. So I came back to the U.S. from a stint abroad in London in 1999. We might remember what that looked like. It was kind of crazy in San Francisco. There was another gold rush on. It was called the dot-com boom. And I came back from London unemployable. I think is sort of how I think about it, which was I was not going to work for another design studio, and I was certainly not going to work client side. I was going to employ myself. My boss at Barclays was fired by the board. He was the CEO of Barclays. So you start to learn about diversification in terms of what design lets you do, and you can have a portfolio of bosses instead of a single one. So I went down that path. So for 10 years, I worked with leadership teams and applied the design practices and the design approaches that I had learned and been applying in this other work to the creation of new businesses. So working with leadership teams to figure out who they are, what they do, why what they do matters, and how they go about doing it and how they tell the world. So essentially core narratives for organizations, brand stories, and then looking at how do they actually deliver on those promises that they're making in a real way. So I did that for 10 years in partnership with a fellow named John Bielenberg, who I'd been working with since 1992. At the end of 10 years, we kind of looked at each other and said, it's great to have a 10-year anniversary. We've accomplished a lot. We don't want to keep doing this for another 10 years, so what's next? And that's when we sort of looked at what we liked best about what we were doing. And what we liked best about what we were doing was working with people who did not imagine themselves as being creative, who would say themselves as being outside of the creative class or the creative economy, and using a set of design principles and practices to unlock their creativity. So we've heard a lot about early education and maybe going into college, but what happens when you take a bunch of people who are mid-career and start to work with them and unlock that creativity, and is that possible? We also liked working with super talented, diverse teams of creative people, whether those are architects or neuroscientists or athletes or whatever they might be, and working in those diverse partnerships. We said we like working with people who can return serve. So Andre Agassi, Federer, none of those guys would have a great time playing tennis with me, all right, because I couldn't return serve. Well, that's how it is also in the world of design and creativity. You like to be out there with somebody who can hit the ball back when you serve it to them. So we built a new business. We focused on this idea of how do we actually use design to drive positive change. That was inspired by the fact that this is an artist rendering. My partner John likes to say it's real, but this was after Sandy, and this was a nice collage piece of what was going on in New York. I overlaid a little bit of the other things going on about this point in time, 3 years ago or so, and said, in a world that's faced with all of those kinds of challenges, how can we use our talent, how can we use our creativity to actually drive positive change in the world? What kind of impact can we have, and how could that be our mission? So, simple kind of way of charting it is this is what it feels like for almost all of us every day. I would guess especially in the Senate. That solutions line might be dipping down. But in our personal lives, it feels like this. In our professional lives, it feels like this. And what we were looking at is there seems to be, if we're going to close that gap between the inventory of challenges that we have and the supply of solutions that we have, we're going to have to be a little bit more ingenious. We're going to have to unlock the creativity of more people. So how do we close that ingenuity gap? That was the question we posed for ourselves, and that's what we built our business around. Just by way of definition, when we talk about ingenuity, and it's not clean sheet, blank paper, creative pie in the sky, anything goes. It's really saying, how do we take advantage of the existing resources that we have, and how can we use them in clever, original, and practical ways to take on those challenges? What can we do with what we got? Because we live in a world of diminishing resources, not increasing resources, really. So we framed, John and I sat back and looked on the work that we had been doing, and we framed a set of practices. For those of you who are familiar with design thinking, we look at them as kind of a next generation of that. It's a simple framework. I believe in simple frameworks. It's a set of practices for anybody here who's involved in the creative world and in the arts world and the design world. They look familiar. I think they're pretty intuitive. And I won't go into them in detail here, but this is what we started applying, what we started introducing to our clients. It also came out of this idea that every single person in the world is born ingenious, and then we systematically engineer that out of them. And we do that in education, and we do that in our personal lives, and we do that in our corporate lives, and we certainly do that in the political realm as well. But that innate ability to be ingenious, we had the reference earlier to MacGyver, for all of us to unlock that inner MacGyver absent the bad haircut, is, it's there.
Yeah, we saw your picture at Otis.
Yeah, I had that bad haircut. If only I'd had that bad haircut. I had a worse haircut than that. So, since then, we've been fortunate enough to apply that in a variety of areas. So it's interesting to sort of see the pie charts and the tables early on that are trying to categorize the creative economy and the occupations. I think it's actually limitless. I think that you can't, and it's been stated a few times, I think you can't find an industry or an area of need where creativity, where innovation, where ingenuity isn't going to pay off. In the education space, we work with university students, and we work with some independent schools in just teaching them how to use our practices and how to apply them. It's pretty straightforward. In the area of early childhood development, we've been working with with ICS in South Carolina, with the Institute for Child Success, and looking at how can we actually use those practices to attack the systems that are conspiring against children, in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of food, in terms of issues like incarceration that actually affect a lot of these kids. So how can we unlock that? So it's another area. It's again another important area to me. I sit on the board of an organization called Not for Sale. We've used these practices to generate ingenious solutions that actually inoculate populations from exploitation. It's pretty easy to inoculate a population. It just takes education, job skills, and employment. Those are straightforward and easy to do, right? But what we found is that social enterprise is a way of getting into those communities, of actually doing that kind of work, and that is really driven by design and innovation and creativity. So we're seeing tremendous success there. We've been doing some work with villagers in Peru and with sex workers in Amsterdam, and now we've finally started a Bay Area project, coming back to California. We also do work with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. With the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, we're sort of looking at how do you fight disease, how do you get more interesting and more ingenious applications from your grantees, since you're funding a lot of work, and how can you actually come back with more creative approaches to the healthcare issues they're taking on. And we also have looked at just how do they promote the idea and enable the idea of a culture of health across America. So you're getting a sense of this. I'll go through a few more of these, but you're getting a sense of this, that the boundaries are pretty porous when it comes to where you can apply creativity, where you can apply design. We work with a large life sciences company in the Bay Area on rethinking their clinical trials and the development of cancer treatment. We are working in the job space, in particular in rural Alabama. We've been working in Greensboro with an organization there called Hero, and using again, design practices to invent restaurants that bring people together around the table who usually wouldn't be around the table together in South Carolina. We've created with the former First Lady a brand called Alabamboo. So if raisins are associated with Fresno, then Alabama would like to be associated with bamboo eventually, not many of the other things it's associated with. So we're doing work there. We've worked with Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. And really attacking, and with SodaStream trying to attack the impact that man is having on the environment, both through the carbon emissions and also through our consumption habits. We've worked on the issue of water in, again, rural Alabama, where unfortunately a quarter of the houses don't have access to water. They don't have water meters. water is not a right in Alabama. And we've also been working on bringing wells to villages in Africa. An odd space to apply. I like that we have Boeing here today. It makes me feel not so alone. But we've worked with some sort of maverick organizations who are looking for less kinetic forms of warfare. Less kinetic translates to less bombs, less killing, using more information and more engagement on the ground. And one of our former clients is now the head of the Center for Smart Defense at the University of West Virginia. So we've been really fortunate to work with him. And last, again, just sort of thinking about the boundaries, we've been working with waste pickers with Libby McDonald at MIT and developing a curricula for waste pickers to organize and unionize and to have negotiating power with municipalities in countries like Nicaragua and Brazil and India. So I hope that gives you a sense of the sort of span of what a design education can bring, what an investment can bring, what the opportunity to apply it in other areas can actually bring. When I reflect on it, what have I learned? It is that anybody and everybody has the ability to be creative, to be a part of generating ingenious solutions. And I've also learned that the status quo, just isn't going to cut it because of the social and economic and environmental challenges that we're faced with. And so we really do need to make a change. It's quite disheartening as somebody who was born in Berkeley and raised in California to see the lack of investment and the lack of funding. I mean, we hear it's an amazing accomplishment to increase a budget by sixfold, but it's still a fairly depressing number. So I think the final thing that I want to just tie in there is, I've learned, the Mach 49 reference is I'm a partner at a Silicon Valley incubator. That incubator serves Global 1000 businesses. So rather than we have incubators in the Valley that serve startups, there are a lot of big corporations around the world who are afraid of this statement that somebody's eating their lunch. What they're doing about it is they're sending people to California. They're sending people to the Valley. They're sending them to be trained and immersed and to gain access to that creative economy, to those people who are working in the Valley, who are teaching at Stanford, at Cal, who are at CCA and places like that, so that they have an opportunity to be in the midst of that. My fear is that for the state of California, that statement's equally true. That if we don't make the investment in the arts, if we don't make the investment in design, if we don't make an investment in innovation, that skill set, that somebody's going to be eating our lunch, which is not a great thought to be pondering too long, but I think it's a reality. So thank you.